You are listening to the MJ SportsCast, recapping the latest games, getting you up to date on the latest sports news, and providing our exciting Bay Area picks. This is the MJ SportsCast with your hosts, Mike Tang and Jerry Yang.
Welcome everyone back to the MJ Sportscast. This is Mike Tang, joined by my co-host every single week, Jerry Yang. Jerry, how you doing today, man?
Good. It's still coming off a high of that Warriors win last week. So yeah, feeling pretty good, man.
It's crazy. It's already halfway into the year. It's already June here, and halfway into the year, we kind of have to think about everything that's happened so far. The Niners, completing their season. If you want to call it a disappointment, if they reached the NFC Championship game, or do you want to call it a success in terms of some of their expectations here? The Giants, they've kind of gone to a slower start than we expected, just because of the expectations from last year's 107 win season. And then we have the Warriors, right, where the Warriors been out of the playoffs basically for the last two seasons. I don't really call last year's play-in as a real playoff, but now they're in the NBA Finals. They're in Game 3. That's crazy, right? Where, maybe earlier this season we wouldn't have thought that they would make it this far and that they would be developing some of their other players. But, they've done a little bit of both, in which they were able to develop guys like Moody and Kuminga to a certain extent, and also kind of keep this core together for another run.
Yeah, man, I think that's the most impressive part, is being able to, not have Clay for most of the season, and he comes back firing. We lost, I think, Draymond for near the end of the season and Steph Curry, but yet all the guys got healthy in the right time and making this push. And you mentioned all three Bay Area teams that we cover, and I think all three of them, in some ways, exceed the expectations already, right? Because the Giants, I know this season is still kind of new, but if you think back last season, having that many wins before that season happened, we never expected them to even make the playoffs. Let alone have one of the best records in baseball. And then same with the Niners. Like, you didn't think they would make the playoffs at all, given them going I think 6-3-1 or 4-1 to start the season, or 1-4 rather to start the season. They made it to the championship and almost to the Super Bowl again. So overall, I think what it shows is that these teams have a lot of juice, in terms of the fan base, in terms of ownership, and in terms of building talent from within. This isn't like an LA situation where they're just hiring guys and trying to buy a championship. So in a lot of ways, that's why it pays off. So yeah, I'm happy with all three teams. It makes me kind of proud to be a fan, and hopefully, we break the trend of the other two, and the Warriors win a championship. I think that's the only thing that's missing now, in my opinion.
I mean, out of the three teams that we mentioned here, who would you want to win the championship more? Because, the Warriors, they're the most recent team here in the Bay Area that have won a championship. Then it goes the Giants, back in 2014. It's almost 8 years, since they've last won it. Then you have the 49ers, who last won the Super Bowl back in 94. Which one would be a little bit more satisfying out of the three, do you think?
To me, it's the Niners, dude. Mainly because they haven't won it for a long time, and they came really close. Plus, I think, to me, out of the three sports, I would rank football as kind of my number one, dude. Overall. So to me, I think it means a lot more, and also it's the first one of the Jed York ownership, right? So, and also Kyle Shanahan breaking his curse and John Lynch getting over the hump and all this stuff. I think there's just a lot of storylines that go into the Niners, as well as just how many teams we saw for the Niners that were bad for so long, and then I think during the Harbaugh era, that was really disappointing that they didn't win one too. So winning a championship with them, I think makes up for that, right? And to me, I think that means to me the most. And I think when I last saw a Niners championship is what 94. That I was like pretty young, I couldn't appreciate it. So now that I'm an adult, at least I saw the Giants win a championship, saw the Warriors win one. But in my adult years, I haven't seen the Niners. So that's why I would pick him. How about you? Who to you would be? I guess which three teams would you feel most satisfied?
Well, right now, I don't really feel too satisfied if the Giants or the Warriors win it all, right? Just because of the recency bias coming from those two
Mhm.
winning franchises. I'm on board with the Niners here just because of all the disappointment that has happened and that they've come so close to winning it all, both in the Harbaugh years, I believe in 2013
Mhm.
with Kaepernick and Crabtree and those three failed pass attempts in the fourth quarter against the Ravens. And then we have the Niners with the Shanahan era, basically up 10 in the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter here. And I think they were about 90% chance to win that
7 minutes
game
left. Yep.
with 7 minutes left here, and they blow a 10-point lead just like that. And then just this past season, losing to the Rams in the NFC Championship game after basically destroying them in the regular season and the past season before that here. So the Niners really have something to prove, right? And they really need to win a championship in this Shanahan era to really validate their team. So I'm really looking forward to the 49ers making some big strides this season.
Yep. And I think to me in our division, the Niners are the most unknown, right? Mainly because of Trey Lance. We don't know how he's gonna perform, So I think the ceiling for Lance is pretty high. I think that's why the Niners are moving away from Jimmy G. Is they know that they probably can't get over the hump of Jimmy, right? You can win games, but I think what the Niners are trying to do is build a dynasty, right? They're not just trying to win one Super Bowl and be happy with it. They want to try to win multiple Super Bowls. In order to do that, you need to have a quarterback that you can kind of ride away with for multiple years, And I think they're kind of realizing with the injury history of Jimmy G, with the limited arm strength, that he's not going to be the guy, right? So I think that's why they're moving on, even though I think a lot of people we're a little bit disappointed that we are moving on, right? Because Jimmy G brought a lot of excitement to the Niners when he first got here. I think when we saw the first few games, he was looking hot. He was looking like a guy that was here to stay for a long time. And the way that he finished that season, the first season that he came in for, he looked like hope, right, for the Niners to start that dynasty. But I think as the years went on, they kind of realized that he's not going to be the franchise QB that's going to carry us to multiple championships. So
Yeah, the Jimmy G situation really was false hope for Niner fans in a sense that you have to mask all his limitations and all his weaknesses here. And it was evident throughout the years and throughout a lot of playoff games. And I think what the 49ers are trying to do in terms of adding to that dynasty is, like you said, having a great quarterback who's matchup proof against most teams in the NFL. Here, if you can find someone who's close to like an Aaron Rodgers type, who you can throw in there and not have to run the ball 45 times a game, right? And that you can trust to win games by themselves, then yeah, I think the Niners will have found a gem in Trey Lance. But it's still to be determined, right? So we still have to go through OTAs. We still got to go through training camp here. And I think the Jimmy G era is behind us, right? That's what it looks like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right, and I think that's why he was excused from mandatory minicamp. I mean, the guy's injured anyway, so it's not like he
Yeah.
can't practice. But Matt Miyoko on KNBR mentioned that in 2 or 3 weeks, he should be able to throw again, and when that happens, I think he'll be a good trade candidate or a cut candidate, right? They can't really cut Jimmy when he's hurt, right? I think that's the main thing because there'd be a lot of dead money that they would have to incur for an injured player, and that's all have to do with like CPAs and stuff like that, right? That the players union does not want that to happen. So it's kind of a waiting game, but hopefully by the end of this month we'll know for sure.
Yeah. In addition to that, Alex Mack, the center, retires recently here. And the reason why Alex Mack retired, or they announced it at this date, is because I believe the 49ers saves quite a lot of money, right, due to the salary cap here and because of his retirement. So I think they saved quite a few $1 million with this here. But what do you think about some of the replacement options? I know, Jerry, you've been covering a little bit more of the 49ers draft most recently, and maybe some of their free agency and roster moves in terms of who will play the center position. But what are your thoughts about his retirement and what the Niners will be able to do to replace him?
Dude, it's gonna be a big loss. Like, no matter who they put in, it's a huge loss, right? Because even if you put a rookie in there, and they didn't really um, draft a center in this last draft, right? They did have an drafted rookie that they did pick up that, but the guy's more comfortable in right guard, and I think he's just gonna be on the practice squad, right? So I think what they have to do now is have to move Brunskill to center. Aaron Banks had played center before as well, so and he has the size for it. So potentially they can try those two guys out and see which one sticks, right? But it's gonna be a drop off either way, and that's a position I feel like we've underestimated numerous times in the past. Like it's not a flashy position. It's not a position um, that really wows people. But once you have a bad one, it's pretty historically bad. You know what I mean? And it couldn't come at a worse time when you have a new quarterback in as well. That really stings. So hopefully we have one of those guys figured out. If not, maybe it might be a free agent push again. But I'm comparing this similar to picking up like Josh Norman, right, for this cornerback position where we had no depth in that position, and we had to go in the market and find someone off waivers or off free agent to get them. And this could be the case again. It's unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
And they tried other guys like Weston Richburg in the past, and um, like Ben Garland and all these guys, and they all stink, and then now we're kind of stuck in this situation. So yeah, I'm hoping for the best. Hopefully, this is where Aaron Banks finally pays off for us. They
Hmm.
did pick him up for the versatility and for the size, but unknown again. So.
My thinking is if the 49ers knew about this retirement ahead of time, why weren't they planning, to have a legitimate replacement
I know,
um,
sloppy, right? I think it
for
was
that
sloppy.
position?
Yeah, I agree. It's sloppy. They thought he's gonna not retire. I think they didn't know, right? And he announced his retirement right after his marriage, after his wedding, right? I think they were trying to like be polite to him or something, or some weird loyalty to him. But once he restructured his contract, he knew he was gone. So I agree with you. I think the Niners could have planned a little bit better here. They kind of dropped the ball on this one, I think.
In some happier news, Frank Gore signs a 1-day contract with the 49ers. Do you have any great memory of Frank? I would start off by saying with Frank Gore is just his resilience and his longevity here, and he's had two ACL tears, one on each knee, both right and leg, and he's still able to kind of play and be one of the leading rushers in NFL history here, and being able to play through multiple coaching changes, multiple quarterbacks here, and just him being like such a franchise face, for the 49ers through thick and thin. That's my memory of Frank Gore.
Yeah, man, like 16,000 rushing yards. That's a pretty big feat, you know. Like I don't think a lot of people has breached even the 15,000 mark yet in recent memory. So yeah, I think for me, it's actually him starting out. You know, I think Kevin Barlow was the running back at the time. Dude had a lot of drop issues, couldn't find a hole and all that stuff. And they put in Frank Gore. And when he started, it was rocky as well. He had a lot of fumbling issues, right, to start his career. But he figured it out. And once he figured it out, he became kind of a solid running back overall. And just seeing, yeah, I think I agree with you on the versatility, on being able to be the workhorse and not be injury prone. And I think that's why he was drafted pretty late to kind of start his career, right? That's why, it was kind of a surprise. Yeah, I think it was picked up in the third round in 2005. Um, and then now, he's going to be a Hall of Famer for the Niners, and I'm not sure if he'll be NFL Hall of Fame, unfortunately, because he hasn't won a Super Bowl. But we'll see. The NFL Hall of Fame is kind of interesting in the sense that it's not as hard as baseball, but at the same time, they do look at rings a lot, right? Like championship rings make a huge difference and factors in, and also presence in the media and coaching, right? So I think if Frank Gore does go into like coaching, or into some kind of media position, he might have a better chance of getting in, but we'll see. It won't be a first ballot, I think. So
What's a little peculiar about the NFL Hall of Fame is that there's not really a baseline of or criteria to determine like how players are getting in, as opposed to baseball. There's statistics and there's WAR, right? But with football, no one's really being accountable for these votes,
yeah.
and why they're voting these players in or coaches in for that matter.
Mhm.
But just from the eyeball test and just from that rushing stat alone, I think Gore should be able to get into the Hall of Fame pretty easily. At least maybe, if not the first time, at least maybe the second or third time.
Yeah, we shall see, right? So, but I do agree with you. It's a little bit more spontaneous in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think Bryant Young made it this year for the Niners, and T.O. talked about being there. He didn't even go for his own ceremony, you know. But yeah, good for Bryant Young. I think that was one guy where, yeah, he never won, I think, a championship, right? But his longevity, just like Gore, kind of got him in there, and his leadership, right? So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Oh, actually, he did win a Super Bowl. So Brian Young did win a Super Bowl. I forgot about
He
that.
won a Super Bowl, I believe, when he was a rookie coming out of Notre
Yeah,
Dame
yeah, he was
in
a rookie.
'94.
That's right.
Here,
Yeah, you're right.
let's move on to baseball real quick. We kind of talked about the Giants and Gabe Kapler here, but the Giants finished a 5-5 road trip. They almost got swept by Cincinnati. There, they had a lot of close games against the Phillies. They could have lost either of those games, and they come back from this trip 5-5, and they split against Miami Marlins as well here. But there's a lot of criticism coming out of the media and maybe even the locker room in terms of Kapler pulling pitchers out of the game too soon, right? You had Junis, who pitched 6 innings, and that was probably the longest start for a starting pitcher lately, right? So he's been pulling guys like Logan Webb and Alex Wood. What are your thoughts about keeping those players in too long or too early?
It's interesting, right? Because I think that's a really tough debate, and we kind of went through this when you were out. That we talked about Clayton Kershaw getting pulled pretty early by Dave Roberts when he was on track for a perfect game, right? So there's always some controversy around pulling guys. To me, though, I think Kapler is looking at the long game as well as a lot of pitching changes and pitching decisions are made by analytics in the front office nowadays more than actually the manager, right? So
Yeah.
it's not a sole decision by Kapler, but he kind of takes the heat for it because traditionally it's always been the manager who pulls them. So to me, for a long run, it's good. Um, and he's trying to keep guys fresh. So I don't really have a huge issue with it. And it's not like those guys were having perfect games or no hitters or whatever, right? They were just pulled a little bit early when they were hot with a lower pitch count. And then unfortunately the bullpen was out of hand at that point, right? So but I mean, what's your philosophy on it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Kapler is taking orders from above here, so it's really not on him, and he's just being the messenger
Yeah.
for these moves. And what Kapler is really doing is he's protecting his starting pitchers, right?
Mhm.
And the only chance the Giants will be able to win the NL West and make it to the playoffs if they have a healthy five-man rotation going through the stretch run in September. If none of those guys are healthy, if those guys are on the injury list, there the Giants really have no chance
Mhm.
to win. Their
Mhm.
best chance is through starting pitching because they're not going to be able to out hit the Dodgers and Padres here, and obviously their defense is not the best either, right? So, they're going to have to count on Rodon. They're going to have to count on Logan Webb, Wood, DeSclafani, Junis, and Cobb. And, most of those guys have had shoulder injuries. And that's why the Giants have been able to acquire them. All of these guys have had injuries over injuries on their right shoulder. And that's why the Giants have to protect these guys from pitching way too many innings. So I understand it. And this basically wouldn't be a topic of discussion if the bullpen actually is able to put up zeros when they
Yeah.
come in. But that hasn't been the case, right? These relievers have been coming in and have been giving up runs after runs throughout the past several weeks. And that's why the Giants just haven't been playing well.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think we're getting some good news from Discafani. I think he's been throwing in the bullpen for San Jose Giants. So hopefully we get him back. But yeah, I agree. I think this is kind of the strength of the team so far, especially with a lot of the bats being out as well. We still don't have Brandon Belt back yet, right? So that's another um, kind of big blow or injury to the team. So we did get Austin Slater back, which is good. I know what's called Alex Cobb is back. He was day to day before, and that's why. I thought that was a good move to pull him a little bit early. Maybe he's already seeing the pitch wasn't good. The biggest controversy was Logan Webb, but he's your number one. You kind of have to protect a guy, and it's a long season. It's not like the season ends, or this isn't like the playoffs, right? Where you pull someone early and get some heat for it. There is still a long way to go. So I think I agree with you overall that you know people are overreacting. I think because it's a long season, people overreact to losses a lot more. So.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the most exciting part of of this week is the NBA playoffs, the NBA finals here. Let's talk about actually, the coaching staff for the Warriors. Mike Brown is going to be the coach of the Sacramento Kings after this season, but he's finishing his time, as a bench coach. And then we have Kenny Atkinson, who's another associate coach, on the bench, and he's reportedly the finalist for the Hornets head coaching job. Do you think this is going to be an issue when all of these guys are out as a coach? Because we've seen some pretty huge Warriors adjustments in the third quarter, right? Right before they come to the second half, where they just kind of blitz teams and outscore teams in the third quarter. And I think that's a big contribution from the coaching staff more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think overall, though, as long as you have Steve Kerr, who tends to surround themselves with really good coaches, right? I think that's why these guys are being called for head coaching jobs. I mean, we saw that with Luke Walton. We saw that in the past with, like you mentioned, Mike Brown and Kenny Atkinson. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not too worried as long as Steve Kerr's there. I think he's underrated in a lot of ways as a head coach. I mean, we did see him without not being in the playoffs during that first series with the Grizzlies, right? And how Mike Brown did, and how the Warriors looked a lot different. The adjustments weren't there in the second half, especially in the last game that they barely pulled out. So I would say as long as we have Steve Kerr and he knows who to contact to help him out, who are former head coaches, that kind of step in and give some feedback and helps him with adjustments. And I think it's a trend too, right? He tries to surround himself with at least two former head coaches or a potential rising head coach on the staff to be under him and be giving him feedback. So to me, I'm not too worried. I think the trend will continue as long as the Warriors are winning, and this goes with any sport, really, right? If you think about even the Niners and how we lost Mike McDaniels to the Dolphins as a head coach, right? Robert Sala to the Jets. I think once you start winning, you start losing guys. The Rams started losing guys, right? Because these guys, assistant coaches, their stock goes up when you're winning. So not a huge surprise at all for me, and I think yeah, so I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
I think the main thing we have to worry about now is let's win this championship because we know those windows don't last long, right? And we know that the salary cap situation with the Warriors is going to be dwindling, mainly because we have guys that we have to pay, top guys, so those windows don't last very long. So let's see what happens in this series, but I'm hoping we get a championship this year.
Yeah, but winning does solve everything, to be honest with you, especially if you do win in the playoffs and you do win in the finals and you do accumulate all those home ticket sales there. Those millions of dollars, they really start pouring in, especially this season at Chase Center. So if they keep continually winning and making the finals, then I think we can still pay these players, right? But if we don't, then we're going to have to go through a little bit of a fire sale in that sense.
Hmm. I think the main thing though for the Warriors, which is good, is that Lacob has shown that he's willing to take a cap hit, and he actually got criticized. Right, the Warriors did get criticized for paying guys and taking that luxury cap by some of the other teams. Like some anonymous teams out there were saying the Warriors are kind of buying their championship because they're willing to spend. But as much as that criticism is bad, it goes to show the commitment of Lake Up and squad to continue this dynasty as well, right? So, but we'll have to see. Windows are short, windows are short. That's all I can say. So,
Well, when the Warriors and Lake Up decided to sign a guy like Kelly Oubre
mm,
a couple off seasons ago here, they did go over the luxury tax and they had to pay an extra $68 million for basically a $14 million player here. And you can even argue that he wasn't even really worth $14 million, right? So, I think that Lake Up has, he's proven time and time again that he's willing to spend to win, right? But I think he's also learned from that Kelly Oubre mistake that, okay, well, if a player is not of like Kevin Durant statue or that type of production, you don't really try to, overextend yourself and
yeah,
sign a guy like that too. So
yeah,
I think
but
they learned their lesson, honestly,
yeah.
and we're going to have to see. And I think they'll be able to manage the salary cap a whole lot better moving forward.
Yeah, I think they want to keep guys that are on the roster already, right? I think that's what I'm thinking because they do have a lot of rookie contracts with Mosley and Kaminga and guys like that can help out. But you know, being able to retain a guy like GP2, Jordan Poole. Those are some names I could think of that I think he'll be willing to spend a little bit to get those guys back. Obviously GP2 is probably on the bubble in some ways because they're not gonna you know reach for him if he's demanding too high of a salary. But a guy like Poole, you're not going to lose Jordan Poole at this point, right? I think he's a foundation of the team now. And
Yeah.
looking at the luxury tax bill that they got for this season, it's 56 million. So they're not exactly being cheap here this year. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it's been a great season, right? Regardless of the outcome. To me, it exceeded expectations, but like we mentioned, we wanna close out here.
So how do you feel about the rest of the finals here? It's been well documented. Game one, they blew a fourth quarter lead, 10 points. The Boston basically blitzed them in the last 6 or 7 minutes of the fourth quarter there. The Warriors left really a lot of uncontested three-pointers, especially to Al Horford. Then they responded back in game two and basically cleaned that up where, they didn't allow open shots. They didn't allow the role players to beat them there. And this game was basically over by the third. And Boston was playing a lot of their bench players in the fourth quarter. So, it's going back to Boston here, 1-1. Do you think the Warriors can kind of go for the sweep, finish this in 5 games?
No way, man. This game, I wish that could happen, but looking at how this is going, I think we'll be really lucky and fortunate if we can split in Boston so that we can kind of take back home advantage and then kind of win out from there, right? Let's see how that goes. But that'll be a big win if we can do that. I think the worst case scenario is if we get swept in Boston, then I think the panic mode will be back. But I think a split will be nice, And one of the guys that really impressed me on the Boston side is Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's the one that got them going in the fourth quarter, right? He started hitting a few shots, then all of a sudden Tatum started feeling it, and then Marcus Smart started feeling it, and all these role players, like you mentioned, also started feeling it. And I think what they did more in game two is they did a lot more pick and rolls. They started locking down the role players and letting Brown get his, like having him do what he does, but not letting everyone else get shots. I think Jason Tatum wasn't playing well. I think he had a terrible plus minus. It was like a minus 36 or something like that. And that's a guy was kind of killing them in game one near the end, right? So I think the adjustment was great. But game three is gonna be a completely different game. I think the Celtics will adjust, and then we have to see how that goes, right? And I think this will be a long series. I think this series is, I think we originally picked 5. Maybe I picked 5 and you picked game 6, but now I can think it's easily going to go to game 7. And I definitely feel that Boston is one of the best teams in the league, and they're kind of proving it, right? Mainly because the Warriors, I think, have really strong offense and play their best in the third quarter. And Boston's able to outlast that in one game, and even game in game two, Boston started out really hot, beating them the same way they were beating them in that fourth quarter, right? And then I think the adjustments really helped a lot. So I can imagine Boston making more adjustments, and they're really good in the fourth as well. I think they have one of the best fourth quarter stats in the NBA, right? And especially in the playoffs. So it's gonna be crazy, This is not gonna be a pushover team that they had. I think in the other playoff series they had prior, once they went up, especially 12 points, double digits, in the third quarter, they're able to just close it out. But Boston's not a team that can go away, right?
Yeah.
The good news for the Warriors, though, I think losing game one really woke them up, right? It kind of put them on tilt a little bit. I think they were feeling very confident and maybe overly confident going into the series, but now they're not going to underestimate the Celtics. And hats off to Ukuda, the head coach for the Boston Celtics, who's also a great Popovich disciple, just like Steve Kerr. He's been doing a good job. He's making great adjustments, like how Steve Kerr and squad are doing. So, yeah, definitely underestimating them a little bit when we started the series. So,
I have, well, there's a couple things that do favor the Warriors' way to conclude this series, and one is just Boston's inconsistency, both offensively and defensively. Second, they do commit a whole lot of turnovers. They may even commit more turnovers than the Warriors, and the Warriors commit a whole lot of turnovers, both in the regular season and the playoffs.
Mhm.
And then lastly, you talk about Jaylen Brown as being a good offensive weapon, but the thing is that he's not the type of guy that you rely on all 4 quarters, and that he does disappear in a lot of games as well
Yeah.
here. So I think the lack of secondary firepower for the Boston Celtics is going to hurt them throughout this series. And I do think fatigue will eventually wear the Boston Celtics down too, just because of how many games Boston has played. We don't really know how injured Jason Tatum's shoulder really is
Mhm.
as well here. And they have a whole bunch of other injuries too with the rest of that roster. So I think the Warriors will definitely be having an edge throughout the series, but we'll see because playing at Boston is tough, like you mentioned here. I'm just hoping we don't get blown out one of those games in Boston, and just kind of make it competitive both games here. Try to split that road series, and then take 2 out of 3 at home.
Yep. And I guess one of the things I want to talk about, and I forgot to put in our notes here, is that what do you think about the whole Draymond Green situation? I think there was a lot of controversy around, especially him getting tied up with Grant Williams and him trying to pull off, I think, Jaylen Brown's pants at one point. A lot of people thought he was going to get a second technical when that happened, but he didn't. And then there was a lot of talks about home cooking, and the Boston Celtics also looked like they were making a pitch to get Draymond more fouls in the next game, right? Similar to what LeBron did in 2016, where in press conferences was talking a lot about how unfair the reffing is and stuff like that. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, dude. Like, do you think that was justified, or like, what did you see in terms of that whole situation?
No, I just think it's honestly white noise in the background here. I don't really think Boston has a case against that. Just because I don't think what Draymond did throughout game 2 was really all that bad, to be honest with you here. And it wasn't just like Draymond talking a lot of smack and the other guy wasn't doing anything. Both parties were talking, right,
Mhm.
throughout those plays. So I think the Celtics are just trying to get back into the Warriors' head
Mhm.
there. And I don't think the Warriors are really seeing that as anything of real significance, to be honest with you. Should Draymond have gotten ejected and got that second technical in game 2? I thought the officials really made I thought they really made it a point to not give those guys a double T
Mhm.
there, and I thought that was really good officiating on their end. If this was a regular season game with a different set of referees, I think Draymond Green would have got tossed. But the officials, they were well aware of the situation here, and they were not going to eject Draymond Green out of this game. So I thought the NBA made a good decision of putting these guys in there because these guys are good referees and they do make good judgment calls along the way.
Yeah, I think overall this last 2 games, the reffing was actually a lot pretty good. I thought it was great.
Excellent,
And
actually.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
excellent. It's the best I've seen in the finals, to be honest with you, right? And I think what the ref is trying to do is to keep these guys in the game on both sides, right? And not throw guys out, especially with so many people paying a lot of money to see them live, and see a competitive game going. And once you eject a guy like Draymond, or like maybe you eject a guy like Tatum, maybe on the other side, then that's it, right? The game swings one way pretty hard. So I thought the refing was pretty good, and yeah, I do agree with you that the Celtics were also kind of pushing the button a little bit. What I saw a lot was them trying to step over the Warriors a lot. I don't know if you saw that one play with Jordan Poole where I think they both fell down, and then I forgot who it was. Maybe it was Brown, or it was Smart that came up and then tried to step over Poole, and Poole kind of extended his arms and almost tripping the guy, and they thought it was like a malicious like trip by Poole, but it turned out after replay that it was just like a normal, protecting himself type of thing. But I thought throughout the whole game they were doing stuff like that, right? And I think that's why Draymond was kind of taking some advantages of that as well. And to me, I think Draymond kind of got in their heads, and the fact that they're complaining in press conferences is kind of giving the Warriors a little bit of an edge there too, in my opinion. I think if you're going to take the high road on that situation, then they wouldn't happen. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I think it was a chippy game somewhat. But that's how it is, and I don't agree with anybody that thought it was like a dirty part on the Warriors end. It's just how the finals are. So.
All right, let's move on to our picks of the week.
All right, let's do it. All right, so let's start off with the Rockies at the San Francisco Giants. It's a 3-game series. So we have German Marquez going for the Rockies, 1-5, 6.71 ERA, 46 strikeouts, and we have Carlos Rodon going as well. I think that's game one. Game two is Antonio I can't pronounce this dude's name. Santazes. He's 2-3. 5.40 ERA, 14 strikeouts, going up against Alex Woods. And then Austin Gober in the last game going against TBD, probably Janice or Cobb. So I guess let's just pick the series and what you think the record is in this 3-game series.
I'm going to go for the sweep here, 3-0.
Is it because it's in San Francisco? I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, it's in San Francisco. City Connects Tuesday night is today as well here. Carlos Rodon is pitching, so I think Carlos Rodon is going to set the tone here. So they're going to blow out the Rockies here in the first game. I'm also just looking at the pitching matchups. The first starting pitcher is Marquez, has a 6.7 ERA. Second pitcher in Cincinnati, he has a 5.4 ERA, and then the last pitcher going in on Gauber, he has 6.54 ERA. I mean, those numbers are probably screwed by Coors Field, but I think the Rockies, they're not really a team that's looking to play well on the road, right? And Chris Bryant is still out there, and that must be a pretty disastrous signing for the Rockies as well. But I do think the Giants will come in here kind of pissed off about the road trip and just kind of be happy at home and go for the sweep. What do you think?
Yeah, man. Chris Bryant, I think we kind of dodged a bullet there, kind of similar to us dodging a bullet with Madison Bumgarner, like not giving these guys long-term contracts and kind of, not doing well in our team. So here, I mean, to me, I do agree with you. It's probably going to be a sweep, but I'll kind of give credit to the Rockies for one game, mainly because I don't know who the pitcher is in the last game of the series. So I'd say 2 out of 3. Giants still take it. Wouldn't be surprised it's 3 out of 3, but just to be a safe side, I'll say one loss out of the series. So, all right. Pick of the week, game of the week. Warriors at Boston Celtics, game 3. Warriors plus 3.5. Going against the Celtics on Wednesday. Over under is 212.5. Who do you have, Mike?
So the Warriors are 3.5 point underdogs.
Yes.
They're underdogs, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, this is a really, really going to be a tough game here. And I think this is the first game 3 in which the Warriors will be on the road this season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no.
Well, no,
They've
they were
been
in the row in the first series, remember? Because I think
yeah,
was
I think they've been at home the first two games. It's
for the whole series. Yeah.
except against except the conference finals, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Hmm.
Yeah. So I think the Warriors will come into game three ready to play. I think they're gonna make the counter adjustments per se here.
Hmm.
And I think it's a blessing in disguise that the Warriors lost game one and won game two, just because, like what you mentioned, it kind of gave them a wake up call here. And I think they'll be a lot more prepared going into Boston. So I'm going to take Boston here, 3.5, over under 212.5. Whew.
So you're taking Boston minus 3.5?
No, I'm going to take the Warriors
Oh, okay.
here.
You said Boston, so
Yeah.
okay.
I'll take the Warriors 3.5 here, and then I'm gonna go with the over at 212.5. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of a tough game because it's going to be the first game at home. I do expect this series on the road to kind of split. So to me, I do like the points though. Like 3.5 seems good. And this is why this is so hard to pick because if the Warriors lose, they lose bad, right? They
Yeah,
don't lose like close games. I think close games favor the Warriors in a lot of ways. So I think even this plus 3.5, in a lot of ways, Vegas is saying Warriors going to win this game, because otherwise the spread would be a little bit higher, right? So yeah, I will go with Warriors plus 3.5, mainly because I think the Warriors will win, like you said. They'll come out firing, and over under 212.5. Pretty low line again, but this whole series have been low, and the Warriors have been blowing it out both games. So to me, yeah, I'll go with the under just to be kind of a contrarian pick, right? But wouldn't be surprised that it goes over. It's been going over the whole series so far. But yeah, I'll just go with the under to see if that trend changes. Mainly because Vegas usually adjusts a lot when it gets blown out or over. But I think because it's in Boston, they're not sure yet. And
yeah.
so they kind of set the lines like this, right? So yeah, so I'll take the under there.
All right. Well, any lasting thoughts here?
Well, one thing we didn't cover, I think was kind of breaking news for today, is that Debo and Bosa actually showed up to minicamp. So, and Debo actually took the field, right? I mean, were you surprised? I wasn't surprised.
no, because I think if he doesn't show up, he starts kind of losing quite a big chunk of change, right? Each day.
You know what's interesting? They moved up this mini camp because they're expecting to go to a Warriors game. I don't know if you heard about that. They're
Yeah.
thinking for game 5 that the whole team's probably going to go. So that's why they brought up the camp to not start the mini camp at a possibility that the Warriors are, they know the Warriors going to be back, right? Either way. But they moved it a week earlier, basically. So kind of
That's
cool.
interesting.
Yeah. And based on what I saw online, David Lombardi of the Athletics said Trey Lance was the sharpest I've seen him so far this season at today's Niners practice. The best play was a completion on a post to tight end Tanner Hudson, who made a sensational one-handed catch. Hudson was known for those when he played for Tampa Bay. So maybe this tight end is a lot underrated than we thought. He's kind of been a journeyman going through multiple teams, but it was part of Tom Brady's Tampa. So uh,
Yeah, I would take it with a grain of salt, though.
yeah,
Keywords. Keywords is it's the mini camp.
yeah.
Second keyword is journeyman. Here.
I know, and I did see some videos of Trey Lance throwing in camp. His motion's gotten a lot better. I think they fixed a lot of mechanics with him. Um, so either he fixed it with a different quarterback. Rumor is he did work out with Steve Young to kind of work
Hmm.
on his throwing motion a little bit, but it's looking pretty clean. He's having a quicker release actually than he did last season. So don't know if it'll pay off. They did mention on KNBR that Steve Young said that he has all the skills to look for open receiver. He reads the field really well, has the arm strength to get it there. But where he's going to struggle is probably getting the ball there, right? Because I think being inexperienced quarterback, you don't know how fast these defenders get to your face. So even though you make a great read, you know where to throw it. Getting the ball there is going to take some time to learn. And I think that's where the comparisons. Josh Allen was kind of like that for his first 2 seasons. He was able to read the field, know where to throw it, but just couldn't make the completion. So I think if we start seeing a lot of that during the season where Trey Lance is throwing it to the right guy, but the right guys aren't catching the ball, he's either underthrowing or overthrowing it, I think that's a good sign in a lot of ways because that means he's still figuring it out. But by the end of the season, hopefully we start seeing that get cleaned up, right? So,
very good points.
Yep.
All right. Well, that concludes today's episode here of the MJ Sportscast. Go Warriors. Hopefully they come out of Boston alive with a series advantage. If not, I'll be okay with going back home, 2-2 here. But hopefully they come up 3-1. Or not 3-1, but 2-1.
Or 3-1. You're right.
3-1,
right? Because they will win 2 in Boston.
Yeah.
3-1. So, yeah, you're right.
But I'll be okay with it being 2-2 here. It's going to be a good, game 3 and game 4 coming up.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun watching the series. This is why we're fans of the NBA and the Warriors, right? Is to see them in this position. So,
all right. Well, thanks everyone for listening for this week. We'll tune in next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the MJ Sportscast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at the MJ Sportscast, at Mike408, at MindofJerry11. Tune in next week for another exciting episode.